Welcome to Tuesdays With, a monthly lecture series sponsored by the Friends of the Georgetown Library. We're so happy that you're able to join with us today. We're in a bit of a challenging time with technology, with the county's computer system down and that affecting the library system as well as a part of the county. And thus we're looking at creative and alternative ways, fun ways, to be able to continue to do our Tuesday With series. But again, we're so glad you're able to join with us, and we know you will enjoy this presentation today. Tuesdays With is based on a wonderful 1997 best-selling book by Mitch Albom called Tuesdays with Maury. And it had to do with the continuing education of a professor and a student long after the traditional college years. And that's what our series is all about, continuing education for adults as we get to learn more about particularly our community and the needs of our community and the opportunities that are here. And today we're very excited that you're able to join with us. Tuesdays With today is Tuesdays with Tracy Bailey. And excited about that, been looking forward to it for some time. Tracy was born here in Georgetown, is a graduate of the College of Charleston for her bachelor's degree, went on for her master's degree, Coastal Carolina University, and then earned a PhD in education with a specialization in language and literacy from the University of South Carolina. We're excited that she then went on to her career in public education by teaching at the high school level, an English instructor, but after a while decided to take her teaching, as she says, to the street. And in doing that was concerned that instilling in teachers and students and community at large the belief that every student can learn and every learner has a responsibility to pass on that knowledge to others, particularly through reading. And thus she went on with that passion and that vision to found Freedom Readers. And that's how she comes to us today as the president and CEO of that wonderful work here in Georgetown County. She's married to award-winning writer Isaac J. Bailey, and the mother of two, as she describes them, wonderful children, Kyle and Lyric. And also is the author of a beautiful book, a wonderful book. Earlier this year, late last year, she had the opportunity to talk about her book, Riverside Blues, at the Waccamaw Library, a wonderful presentation that you'll find in the YouTube collection of the library. I would encourage you, first of all, to read the book, purchase and read the book, but also to look at that presentation, a beautiful Gullah tale based here in Georgetown County. But today, she comes to speak on Forever Free, a true story of hope in the fight for child literacy. And we're very pleased and very excited that this involves the focus of her next book that will be coming out sometime this year. And it speaks about provides stories of the founding of Freedom Readers, after school and summer literacy program. So I welcome to our speaker today, Tracy Bailey.
Good morning. Well, it may be afternoon or evening when you see this, but I just want you to know how pleased I am to be here today to share a few insights from my upcoming book, Forever Free. The last time I gave a talk here, I was speaking about Riverside Blues, and it was my first attempt at writing and publishing anything of consequence or length. Working on that book was an exercise in imagination. All I had to do, I make it sound kind of simple, but it wasn't. All I had to do was sit at my computer and try to inhabit the headspace of Maybelline and William and Grandma Lucille. Writing that book was about bringing worlds to life and painting pictures of the world the way I thought it should be. But writing Forever Free was vastly different, because this book is more about trying to capture events that have already transpired. It forced me to choose which stories to tell and what lessons could be gleaned. Writing this book was so much harder because it caused me, in some cases, to revisit places I never really wanted to go again. Because as much as this story is about getting to a place where we could be considered successful, it is also about struggle. This book would never have been written had it not been for the energy and dedication of Judith Gurewitch at Other Press. I set up a time to talk with her, knowing that she and my husband Isaac had worked together successfully on 2 books, and I wanted to find someone who would publish the sequel to Riverside Blues, because I thought there was more that I could explore with those characters. Well, by the end of our 10-minute conversation, she had convinced me that I had a different story to tell. She said that the world needed some nonfiction from me, and she thought that I needed to be using my writing to teach, not merely to entertain. And I got so caught up in her enthusiasm that before I knew it, I was saying yes, and I was signing my name on a book contract. More than a year later, I'm proud to share with you that the book is now in production, and it's scheduled to hit the shelves on August 3rd, 2021. I'm counting down the days. In addition to seeing the book published, I've also signed a contract to read the audiobook for a company called Brilliance. So I'll give that a shot, and then you can let me know what you think. I brought with me some of the first chapter of Forever Free, and here's an excerpt that you can enjoy. Books have always been some of my most powerful and influential teachers. From the times my father found the energy to read to me after having worked long hours at the stainless steel plant, to the Wednesday nights my mother took me with her to Bible study in a little abandoned building that used to be a store where I bought Jolly Ranchers and atomic firebombs. Words were wrapped around my shoulders like a patchwork quilt. They were a river of ideas and sounds on which I floated and into which I trailed my fingers. Losing myself within them gave me the freedom to stare into a distant cloudless sky and dream. Like everything else I needed when I was a young child, my parents provided me with books, but I have no recollection of where they came from. I remember being surrounded by them at an early age. Maybe they had a subscription to a children's book club, or perhaps they picked them up from the store when they were shopping. Whatever the case, I would brush my teeth, change into my nightgown, and slide under the covers to wait for Daddy to read with me before we knelt next to the bed to pray. My favorite book was The Monster at the End of This Book, the story of Grover, the furry blue Sesame Street character who kept warning us to stop turning pages because of the monster he knew was waiting at the end. He tied ropes to the pages so we wouldn't turn them. He built brick walls so we couldn't reach the end. When we finally arrived at the end of the book, we, the readers and Grover himself, discovered that the monster was just him. That book made me laugh so hard I almost fell out of the bed every time I heard it. After we'd said prayers and Daddy had kissed my forehead and walked out of the bedroom, I'd open the book next to my Donald Duck nightlight and look at the pictures until my eyes burned with sleep. In addition to Grover, I fell in love with the Berenstain Bears and Dr. Seuss and a host of other colorful books with words that rhymed. And I'd go on to discover the Boxcar Children and Ramona the Pest when I was in elementary school. By the time I reached middle school, I had found Judy Blume and devoured every book she'd ever written. My sister Evelyn was a voracious reader and let me borrow books from her well-stocked shelves, which contained a few Harlequin romances and the entire Flowers in the Attic series by V.C. Andrews. In high school, I dragged myself toward the summer reading list I needed to complete to be ready for advanced English classes in the fall. At that stage in my development, I preferred books that mirrored my reality, and I didn't think my teachers would include anything that would interest me. To my surprise, I couldn't get enough of Wuthering Heights and Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Watership Down captured my imagination in a way I didn't expect. They weren't mirrors, but windows into another world, the temporary escape from real life that I needed. Then one summer, I took a long look at the choices on the list and chose Richard Wright's Native Son, which introduced me to what some young Black boys in the city faced. It raised questions of racial inequality and economic despair. I could still remember Bigger Thomas's fear rising from the pages of that paperback like smoke. With that book in my hand, I was completely at Wright's mercy, and my love for reading was solidified. The story in Forever Free goes on to talk about more of the books that I love and more of the books that I've read. But they also start to talk about some of the students that I met over the course of my teaching career. One of those stories is about a little girl by the name of Raven. And I met Raven when Freedom Readers started in Maury County in the Conway area. She lived in a public housing development, and shortly after we had the program started, she came into the room that day, and I noticed that she looked a little bit different on that day. Her shoulders were a little slumped, and there wasn't quite the same sparkle in her eyes. And she took a seat after we'd gotten started, and I noticed her and I welcomed her. And not long after she was in the room, I saw 2 police officers in her, and they asked, "Is Raven in here? Is Raven in the room?" And she raised her hand and she said, "Yes, sir, that's me." And they said, "I need to speak with you for a minute." And they walked into another part of the building and came back. I later learned that there had been a shooting in the community that day, and Raven was one of the witnesses of that shooting. She was around 8 years old at the time, I believe, but the maturity with which she handled herself, with which she looked at me and said, "Miss Bailey, I need to go handle some business." And she walked out of the room and spoke to those police officers and came back. All these years later, I cannot forget the story of that little girl. I can't stop thinking about what it must have been like for her to be in the middle of a situation like that. She didn't choose her circumstances. She didn't choose her zip code. But what we needed to do as a Freedom Readers community and society is create a space for her that was so safe that she could feel like she could come there week after week and meet stories and people who love stories and wrap those stories around her shoulders like a patchwork quilt, the way that I was able to do when I was a child. Later on, Freedom Readers was born in Georgetown County. I think it was around 2012. The story I told you about Raven took place in 2010. But 2 years later, I happened to be making a presentation about Freedom Readers and came across an old classmate of mine who was working with some students in Georgetown. Her name is Sandy Jackson. And Sandy and I began to talk about what we could do in Georgetown County with Freedom Readers. She invited me to Arnett AME Church, and I'm so glad that she did. That first session that we had at Arnett was electric. It was so beautiful. There were so many youngsters. We take about 20, and I think we had about 20 at that time, that came out, and we all learned all of the presidents that we had in the United States up to that time. And I would say about 80% of the kids in that first group could recite for you the names of all those presidents, all the way from Washington to, at that time, Barack Obama. Now, I couldn't do it, but they could do it, and I was so pleased and impressed. The thing that really had me so excited about working at Arnett, and I would drive the hour from my house to Arnett once a week, because I loved seeing those members of that church and the members of that community step forward to put those arms around those babies and help them get exactly what they needed. Many of them were retired teachers, many were retired librarians. All of them understood the importance of reading in the lives of those children. So what they did was build a safe place and a very firm and solid foundation for those kids' education. They were able to ask questions, and they were able to really address what they needed at that time. So I love the fact that it was very tailored for the kids that showed up, and continues to be tailored for those children in that community. I tell a couple of other stories about some other students that I met while I was working with Freedom Readers. But you know, it's these stories that have shaped who I am as an educator and a nonprofit leader. It's these stories and the books my dad read to me as a child that keep me motivated each and every day. It's the way my mama signed me up for every job they had at my church, from Sunday school secretary to YPD conference official. It was the way that she pushed me and the way that I saw those tutors push the scholars at Arnett AME Church as well. Push them in a very loving way, but left no question about the fact that their expectations were high and excellence was the standard. Freedom Readers grew from Arnett in Georgetown County to working at Gordon Chapel AME Church in the Murrells Inlet area, to working at Mount Zion AME Church in the North Santee area, which is the very church that gave birth to me. So I am just so pleased to see that growth in Georgetown, and am hopeful that as the COVID numbers go way, way down, the number of scholars that we'll be able to reach in this county and beyond will go way, way, way up. It's the way neither of my parents gave up in the face of struggle that continues to motivate me. And that's my word of advice for all of you today. If you understand that you have been given gifts that could make the world better, please use them, no matter what that might require and no matter how difficult it might seem. Now more than ever, I believe the world needs your light and your brilliance and your fire and your power. We are just waiting for you who are listening to me now to discover that thing that calls you home to yourself. For me, it's reading. And for you, it could be sewing or cooking or singing or pottery. Whatever it is, embrace it, explore it, dance with it, and breathe. We owe it to all of our beautiful brothers and sisters that we've lost during this COVID tragedy. We owe it to our kids who are trying to find their way. Let's live. Let's take a chance. Let's risk failure and reach for hope. That's what I did at the start of Freedom Readers in 2010. I reached for hope, and to my surprise, it reached back for me. And through its rebirth and multiplication, it has led to great avenues of expression for hundreds of children. It's my prayer that each one of those kids found the sparkle of a precious jewel in the stories that we shared. And I hope that at least one of them will someday stand tall and say of their experience, at Freedom Readers, I really learned to read, and now I am forever free. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. That was really a wonderful presentation, and we're excited. August 3rd will be circled on the calendar in anticipation. I don't know if we'll count down the days with you, but we'll make sure we get word out to the Friends of the Library that the book has been published and places where they might be able to purchase it. Really looking forward to it. I'd like to ask a few questions about the book,
Okay.
if I may. You mentioned there were, obviously, through your life and experience with Freedom Readers, there's been a lot of stories and a lot of experiences. How did you select particular ones as you were putting the book together?
Well, I think I wanted to focus on those stories that would really help people understand that starting a nonprofit from scratch is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to do, but at the same time focusing also on the areas where we found success. So I wanted there to be a bit of a balance, and I wanted there to be stories that really could teach a lesson. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So does that also mean that since you have so many stories remaining, there will be a volume 2 of Forever Free?
I'll be honest with you, Bob. The writing of this book was more difficult than I thought that it was going to be. My publisher and editor really pushed me hard in some areas, and I know that I've grown a lot as a writer. But I'm really not planning on a part 2 of Forever Free. Now, for Riverside Blues, there may be a sequel to that one.
Okay, because I was going to ask that. I know so many people have enjoyed that book. And to see more of maybe a sequel or a prequel. You heard the idea here for the first time?
Actually, I hadn't really thought much about a prequel. So
you could go either direction, but that's a possibility.
Yeah. Definitely.
You have more of the stories of those people who were a part of that wonderful story that still need to be told.
I think so. I think being able to go back to that same community and walk around in the shoes of those characters is really very liberating for me, I think. I learned a lot about myself and was able to incorporate the rich history of my family and really put that down on paper for my children and their children. So I think that was a sacred type of endeavor.
And I know in that book you were using names of people you know, not necessarily that they were the characters, but
Right.
do you still have some names left from your family that you can use?
Lots and lots of names. And nicknames, because nicknames are very, very colorful in the area where I grew up.
Maybe some of those individuals may not want those names out there.
Maybe. You're right. You're right.
Tracy, at another level, and you just made reference to this in the writing process, I'm sure some of the people who are watching or listening to this are themselves writers or amateur writers or wannabe writers. Mm-hmm. Would you have any advice for them now that you have now your second book that's about to be published? I'm sure that they would be interested in knowing what is it you've learned, what would you do, not do, what's some counsel in being able to be a good writer like you are?
Well, thank you for that. I guess that the jury's kind of out, as far as that second book is concerned. So let's just,
Okay.
manage our expectations here. But I think one thing I would say for anyone who wants to be a writer is that the first thing you have to do is make a commitment to actually writing. Because I have learned that sometimes there's a lot of bad writing actually that you have to do before you can actually get to the truth. And so I made a commitment to myself that I would get up at 5 for a certain amount of time and just block off an hour before my life gets so busy that I, don't have time to do it. And I would sit at my computer and try to produce some pages. And not all of those pages end up in the actual book, but I think it's the habit and the process of getting into that space and allowing the words to kind of move through you. I think it's important to have a routine and be rigorous about it. I'm sure every writer doesn't follow the same kind of schedule. I know that my husband does not. So for me, that is what works.
So there weren't two of you at 5 a.m. who were on their computers?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There was one snoring and one typing.
But it sounds like a balance between both the discipline of it and the art of it.
Yeah.
The combination of those two.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you on that. For me, there won't be any art if there isn't any discipline. I think that there had to be, for me, structure in how I put the story together. And I also had to go through the process of learning how to write the 5-paragraph essay. So I'll go back to my Georgetown High School English teacher, Ms. Gordon, who taught me how to write that essay and was very, she was tough on me when it came to that. And if I had not really internalized those lessons that she taught me in high school, I don't think that I ever would have gotten to the point that I could have put a book together.
That's a
so
good
thank you, Ms. Gordon.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a wonderful affirmation of your high school experience.
Absolutely.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about freedom readers. With COVID, how has that affected what you're doing and are able to do?
So I write about this a little bit in the book, actually. So I was writing right around the time that all of our operations kind of shut down. And I write about what it felt like to have to make those telephone calls to our full-time employees and say to them, we're just going to have to furlough you for a while. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. We were in the middle of a session where kids were learning about inventors, and they were coming up with their own inventions, and they were making speeches about these wonderful things, these problems that they were going to solve, and you could tell that they were moving into a new dimension, and then all of a sudden, it got shut down. I thought it was going to be very temporary, like a couple weeks, almost like a hurricane or something like that. But it turns out that a year later, here we are. And so fortunately, we were able to pivot, because I really think that's the word of the day for nonprofits around the country. And we're doing something called the Reading Lab. And so it was almost like we were able to tear down the walls of our Freedom Reader sites and invite families to come in from large geographical areas. And so what we do now is we offer some reading testing, so that families that have worked with kids at home and kids who have not been in school consistently can find out whether or not they're reading on grade level. And then we assign them with an online tutor if they request it. They still meet weekly, and they exchange letters in the mail once a week as well. So the tutoring is continuing, and I think that the kids are really just getting a lot out of the opportunity to work one-to-one with that tutor.
So in that context, but also looking when the day comes post-COVID, people again who are watching and listening to this and getting excited about this, how might they get involved? Are there ways in which that might happen now, and again, thinking of the future?
Yeah, so if you want to get involved right now today, it would be great if you made a donation. We actually have an event coming up on March 1st. It's called Books and Boogie, and I think that's where we met last year. It happened in person then, but we're moving it online. And we are so excited about the fact that we'll have an authors panel on March the 1st on Zoom, and Pulitzer Prize winning columnist Leonard Pitts will be one of our guests. So we are so pleased that he said yes to us. Another one of our guests has just had a show premiere on the Disney Channel, and she's a young adult author. So if you'd like to take part in that, you can just go to our website. Tickets are $50. It's a donation to Freedom Readers. We're always looking for people who can work with the scholars one-to-one. Post-COVID, we're calling this our 3.0 model because we will offer both opportunities to work with scholars online and opportunities to meet with them in person, because for some families, it's just a lot more convenient to keep the online option going.
So by COVID coming along, it's broadened your vision with this option.
Absolutely.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
The other thing we'll do is pass along that information. We'll get it out to the friends as well. We'll send it out as an announcement so that they can sign up for that event. That sounds exciting. And yes, we were there last year. My wife and I, good friend Steve Williams was there, and just very excited about that. And what we heard were testimonials by a number of the children who are involved, sharing how excited. And you know, you go back to that time and think about, oh, it's going upward, and maybe the peak. You have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I also write about that in the book as well. You know, just feeling as if when you're putting something like this together that you're getting momentum and you're really just about to take off, and then all of a sudden something happens and you feel like you're back at the bottom of the hill again, and you feel like you're trying to roll the stone up the hill. But you know, I think things happen for a reason, and I think that there are lessons that we can learn in just about everything.
That's where our faith comes in.
Absolutely, that's where faith comes in. And I know that when we're able to meet with these children and their families again, that our services will probably be needed more than ever. So I'm excited about that opportunity and getting back out there.
That's true. Not just the momentum of Freedom Readers, but the momentum of school and education and learning, all those things as well.
Yes, absolutely.
You mentioned about the 3.0, but other visions as you look to the future of Freedom Readers, other things that you would like to see happening?
Well, there's so many wonderful things that I think we can do. You know, we're sitting here in the middle of Black History Month right now. And I think in 2020, there was a lot of conversation about the way that we share our history with our children. Actually, I was in a conversation with my husband not long ago about whether or not we will still need Black History Month in the future. We are both very hopeful that our history across the board will be taught in a way that is inclusive of every story and every person, so that we don't have to set aside just a month. And I believe that at Freedom Readers, we have the opportunity to create curriculum that will reflect the stories of the people not only in this area, but around the country, that may be our unsung heroes that we might not have known a whole lot about, but have really had a significant and profound impact on the progress of this nation. So one of the things I'd like to see Freedom Readers do is put out curricula that really is reflective of our entire national story.
That's wonderful. 12 months of Black History Month.
Absolutely, 365, 24/7.
That's exciting. Well, we thank you so much, Tracy, for being with us today. This has been a wonderful experience. We're looking forward to the book coming out. We'll be sure to share that with our friends when it is available on the bookshelf. And in addition to that, to be able to also announce that event on March 1st. That's very exciting. And we hope many will participate in that event, contributing to Freedom Readers and a wonderful work that's here in Georgetown County and Maury County.
Yes.
So, and maybe that's a part of the expansion, other places as well.
Absolutely, we're looking to move out.
Well, Tracy, thanks so much. This has been a wonderful February Tuesdays with, very informative, challenging, encouraging. and at the same time, a vision for the future of a very great need here within our community. We hope you'll join us next month in March, actually the same date, and perhaps our computers, well, no, the computers will be up and running by then. We'll be having here a presentation by Libby Bernadine on Let's Talk Poetry. Libby is a very well-known, published, and awarded poet, and she's going to help us understand how to read poetry. That's going to be a good presentation. I'm looking forward to it personally and excited about having Libby here with us. She actually was scheduled for last March, but that was the first of ours, at least initially, to be canceled. Now we have wonderful alternatives and possibilities like this with the online offerings. And so Libby's going to join with us next month on March 15th. And again, that'll be at 10 a.m., hopefully live streamed. And then if not, we'll make sure it's available on YouTube and Facebook as a video, as this one is as well. A lot of great events that are going on, materials that are available through the library. The library continues to do a fantastic service with great people who are doing great work. Story times for children, presentations here as well as in Waccamaw. And we hope that you'll continue to keep informed of those events. If you like, I do a weekly update for the Friends of the Georgetown Library, and what you need to do is just let me know that you'd like to be on that email list. It's rwilley, Willey, 1019 at gmail.com. And I'll be very glad to put you on that email list to keep you informed of wonderful events and services provided by our library here in Georgetown. Tracy 10, again, I thank you so very much for a wonderful presentation. I enjoy talking like this too. This is fun. And we ask that all of you stay healthy and well. God bless you all. Thank you.